My husband and I were looking at houses to buy, and one of them was perfect, except for one room upstairs that made us both feel off somehow, like the room didn't want us to be there. The rest of the house was great, so we decided it was quite possibly due to the low ceilings and rounded corners in there, except the other upstairs bedroom was fine. The only difference being that it had a tiny creepy door that led to an even smaller, oddly angled room, which probably served as attic storage. So to conclude, it was due to the architecture alone, wasn't really a solid theory. Had that been so, we would have found the room with the tiny door to be even more unsettling. Due to the appeal of the rest of the house, and particularly the on-site apartment, we kept it in our top 3 and decided to go back with my in-laws. My mother-in-law believes in paranormal occurrences and claims to be somewhat sensitive, but not as much as my husband and I are. We figured that if the room was haunted, she'd pick up on it and say something, because that's what mother-in-laws do, right? Just not usually in this respect. And she absolutely did. We tried to convince her that it was just the ceilings, but she refused to accept anything other than, "There's spirit in here, ugh!" That having transpired in the way that we know it would, but hoped that it wouldn't. I went back upstairs alone with my camera when everybody else was in the backyard looking at the added apartment. Because the feeling had been so specific and overwhelming, I felt that I needed as much proof as I could get while I was there to get it, and I'm glad I did. I stood in the weird room and whispered, "If you're really here, please be in this picture." And something happened that I've never seen before or after. A cluster of illuminated, glowing baseball-sized orbs appeared in front of me, moving very quickly in the shape of a circle. As soon as I pushed the button to take the photos, they disappeared. The photo was taken with the flash turned off to help rule out reflections on dust particles or little bugs. As quickly as I possibly could, I said, "Okay, now, don't be in this photo." It came out as a normal photo, and I saw no spinning lights. That was all the proof I needed, so I ran down the stairs, out into the yard, and informed the realtor that this wasn't the place for us. When I looked at the first photo, I could faintly see a moving ball of light, only one, whereas it had looked like 5 or 6 of them in person. Now I have a theory that there actually was only one glowing ball, but it was moving so quickly that it looked like it was more than it actually was. Possibly because there was a sort of a tail behind it, like a tiny comet. For the record, if my father-in-law or the realtor felt the same negative energy, they didn't want to talk about it with us. We didn't really mention it to the realtor. But later, when I showed them the picture, my father-in-law didn't have much to say, except in regards to the structural integrity and craftsmanship. He did seem to be focused more on finding a problem with the wiring upstairs, so perhaps he did feel something strange and wanted to blame it on high EMF levels due to old wiring. But all of the houses we looked at had old wiring. That one was actually the newest. My mother-in-law kept commenting on how the next house we saw had a totally different, more friendly energy. We didn't like it quite as much, but she was right. And I don't care how much extra money we could generate from renting an apartment. It totally would have been enough to pay the mortgage on a 30 years loan. I could not get behind buying a house that didn't want me in it as strongly as that one did. Every time I drive by it, I wonder what the new owners use that room for, and if anybody has ever felt put off by it. I'd imagine that, if they're not, it will only be a matter of time until somebody is. It would have been an excellent guest room or a nursery's kid's bedroom, except that all of those are terrible ideas for a haunted room. So this happened, I think 15 or so years ago, when my grandfather passed away. In my culture, the dead are cremated, and there are elaborate ceremonies performed. The body carried by people while chanting the name of a Hindu god, Ram, after it has been cleaned, clothed, and some ceremonial colors put on it. I was never very close to my grandfather. I barely remember ever having much to talk with him, but my parents say I used to talk to him a lot as a child. Anyway, when he died, I didn't really know much about him other than that he was the patriarch of the family and everybody respected him. I was barely 10 years old then and was supposed to stay at an aunt's house. Sneaky that I was, I managed to follow my mother when she left for my grandfather's house, unaware that I was a few steps behind her. Anyway, the ceremony starts. There's a lot of crying, and soon 4 people, including my father, my uncles, and someone I cannot now remember, carry the body on top of a structure made of bamboo and wood. They chant throughout the way. Nobody noticed that I was following them. They reach the cemetery. There's a lot of crying, and I got bored standing at a distance. It's almost dusk and sit weirdly on a nearby platform. I would later come to know that it is sort of a memorial for the deceased. Sometime between all this is happening, I fall asleep. Hours go by, and when I wake up, there is no one, just the last flames burning through pieces of wood. I panic. I look around to see if there's anyone, but there's no one. I start running towards the pyre, hoping perhaps some of my relatives might spot me by the fire and get hold of me. Again, no one. I start crying. I look around to see if I can find my way to the street. Cemetery was on the outskirts of the town, and it was huge to my tiny mind. Rows after rows of those memorials I mentioned earlier. It's almost dark, and I can hear animals howling at a distance. While all this is happening, I have a creepy feeling that I am being watched. It sends a shiver down my spine, and to this, I don't remember ever being so shit scared. It was such a dark and nauseating feeling, a sense of impending doom. I cry louder and start running. Little did I know that I was running deeper into the cemetery, farther from the road that would take me home. I reach the edge of the open ground and catch my breath near the tree line. I can hear faint voices coming from beyond the silhouette of the trees in front of me. Perhaps someone might be returning after gathering wood from there. I am again hit with this nauseating feeling, and it's stronger now. To top it all, every time I walk or run, it felt like I could hear footsteps, like someone right behind me. I turned around several times, yet found no one. I was so afraid at that point that I thought I might die. I took a leap of faith and ran towards the trees. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder, and it seemed like whoever it was near, almost at arm's length, like they could just reach out and catch hold of me. I am audibly sobbing and shouting for help. There's barely any light, but I remember hearing people in the distance. Suddenly, I'm in a clearing and see there's a community pond with a bathing area. I can see some people in my family, and I ran towards. No matter how loud I tried to cry, there was no sound coming out of my mouth. Finally, an ant saw me and ran towards me. The last thing I remember before fainting is a hand on my shoulder and my body almost freezing on the spot. I was sick for a week after that, had nightmares for years, and in general stopped going to my grandfather's house or even the town. To this day, I find it difficult sleeping in the dark, and sometimes wake up with a cold sweat and a creepy feeling on my shoulder, like someone was holding on to me. I am an outdoorsman. I'm very experienced in hunting, camping, hiking, and general survival. I'm very familiar and used to wildlife, and I was charged by what I believe was a cryptid called a dogman. It charged me and my cousin. It was not a bear. A bear cannot move how it did, and it was not a normal wolf, as they can't comfortably run on 2 legs, whereas what charged us seemed natural at doing. I can elaborate further if you wish. This happened around June or July of 2007, I believe. I was around 17 years old, and more cocky then, but still somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors. My family used to own a cabin in NW, Wisconsin. I basically grew up there in the summer. I knew the woods well, but at night it was wise to stay in the cabin, or at least by the bonfire by the beach, because of bears, wolves, and cougars. One of the creepiest things was if you were having a bonfire, the tree line was visible from the fire pit and beach. And at night, you always felt like you were being watched from that tree line. But during the day, the woods always seemed normal, not so creepy. That is until this incident. So this happened somewhere between 1200 and 1400. Me and my cousin were having an airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo. He was not. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage, and our battle took us about 200 meters in to about 1/3 of the way up the trail. We had enough at this point and were standing at the edge of a clearing on the trail talking, and he was maybe 10 feet from me, When I decided to mess with him, I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." He froze. Then I realized the woods were dead quiet, and I got spooked and started scanning the tree line and the other edge of the clearing from left to right when I saw it. Its teeth gave it away. It was panting and staring at my cousin. I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, at least 300 pounds, but it wasn't normal. This wolf was on 2 legs, crouching next to a tree, with its arm grasping the tree. Grasping with a clawed hand, it had reddish-brown fur. I told my cousin that, "We have to go," and next thing I know he is sprinting, and I look back at Wolfie, who had locked on and sprinted a few steps on 2 feet, and then I turned and ran when it looked like Wolfie was dropping to all 4s. It charged us and sounded right on our asses, barreling through the brush, but for whatever reason, let us go when we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin. What stuck with me the most was the sheer size. Wolfie appeared to be nearly 7 feet tall when upright, and that where it should have had front paws, it appeared to have large clawed hands. Now, I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally. I have heard wolves will occasionally kind of walk upright, but as far as I know, they can't sprint on 2 legs, nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more waddle on 2 legs. The closest description is silly, a werewolf or dogman. Thank you for reading. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything and helps me to get monetized in the future. Now watch Cute Kitten to relax.